Hello, my name is Carlos Pascual, and welcome to the CERAWeek conversation brought to you by IHS Markit. These are conversations with leaders in energy, investment, finance, and public policy. And today we have an opportunity to have a conversation with two individuals who really have been at the center of the global agenda of energy and investing. The first comes from Mubadala Investment Company, the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, and the CEO of the petrochemicals and petroleum division, Musab Al-Kabi. Musaba, a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carlos, and I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation with you and Marcel.
It's always a joy to be with partners and friends. And the second partner and friend is Marcel van Pook, an individual who has been a leader in the investment world for some time in the energy sector and who is the managing director of Carlyle Energy Investment Partners. Marcel, great to have you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Carlos, and looking forward to have the conversation with you and with Musaba.
And indeed, what we want to do today is, as people often say, to follow the money, to understand what's happening in investment strategy for sovereign wealth funds, for private equity, how technology and capital are affecting the directions of those private equity funds and sovereign wealth funds, how investment criteria such as ESG are affecting investment decisions. And Musaba, if I could, I'd like to begin with you. And often we talk about the pandemic accelerating history. It's often discussed in the world of geopolitics and economics, for example, that it's not necessarily changing the past, but accelerating the way it's moving forward. Is that happening in the energy sector, and is it affecting the investment strategy that you have at Mubadala?
Yeah, well, let's start with the pandemic. This global pandemic has been, I will summarize it as a wake-up call to many people around the world, including the investment community. What we've seen in the last few months has been truly disruptive. Many institutions, for example, when we plan for this year, last year we debated many scenarios. We debated our business plans. We have set a base case. We've set also downside and potential upside in our projection for 2020. No one globally, I bet you, envisaged a global pandemic like COVID-19. So now the question to all of us is, what is the impact, long-term and short-term, on our business, on our social lives, and on many aspects of our life? So we're currently debating many scenarios and trying to see what the world will look like in the future. There is no clear answer, Carlos. I think the jury is still out. There are many potential implications on the investment decisions, on where do we see the sector, which sectors would benefit from this disruptive, black swan, I would say, globally, and which sectors will probably get impacted negatively in the short or long term. When it comes to the energy transition, we remain of a strong belief that the future would require all types of energy sources. The world in 20 years from now would require oil and gas, would require renewable energy, clean energy. Maybe we can debate at what percentage, but we still believe that the world will require all sorts of energy. And our job in the investment in energy is to adjust and embrace these changes happening in the future. We are updating our view, Carlos, and we'll see how the future will be reshaped by this pandemic. But there is no doubt it's been a major event globally, and it will have major consequences in the short and long term.
Let me pick up on this point about uncertainty, embracing change. And Marcel, one of the things we already have seen in the oil and gas sector is that there has been a flight of capital. Does the pandemic accentuate that more for private equity? What kinds of changes are you seeing in the role of international private equity?
What we see, Carlos, is that clearly the outlook for oil and gas prices is less certain, like Musaba already talked about. It's clear it will play a role. The question is how much and when are we back on the levels of 2019? As a result of that, we've seen, of course, the different impairments of big oil companies, which leads to different leverage ratios, so more leverage, meaning relatively more debt. And so we'll see more asset sales as a result of that to bring the balance back again. And that means that there is more demand for capital in a time when there is less available. So I think that private equity has an important role to play there. And so you will see as a result more private equity, the role of private equity more important in international oil and gas in the coming years.
Fascinating that private equity will become a more critical piece of allowing this rebalancing within the energy sector. Now, some have claimed that these impairments are indicative that inevitably there are stranded assets that are going to be left in the hydrocarbon sector. Is that the case, or is it a period of adjustment that you see over a period of years that will result in renewed investment in hydrocarbons in the future?
So I think it's a combination. I think it's, first of all, it's an adjustment to the pandemic. I think that's what's happening right now, of course. And then secondly, there will be some assets which are stranded. But then I think you should think much more about coal. You have to think more about oil sands, which we think is less investable. But otherwise, I think it's just an adjustment to the situation we're in right now as a result of the pandemic, because the world will need oil and gas longer term.
And for Mubadala, Musaba, are you still seeing a significant role for hydrocarbons within your investment portfolio? How do you see that changing as you look ahead to the future?
Yeah, as Mubadala, we're a responsible investor, forward-looking and long-term. When it comes to the energy space, we are a heavy investor in oil and gas, conventional energy. We're also a big investor and have a strong mandate to expand in the renewable energy. So we started the renewable energy business back in 2006 here in the region, where at that time no one was envisaging the significant role of renewable energy in the energy mix. So as Mubadala, we keep our view clear. Again, we see the future with all sources of energy will be required, but we see also an energy transition. We need to be, careful on how we see the future. I think it would be a big mistake if people, have a state of denial and think that the oil and gas will continue to be the dominant energy source for the next 100 years. We understand that there is an energy transition, and we position ourselves as a responsible investor, and we are active and an investor in all sources of energy. As Marcel mentioned, there are certain types of energy, for example, with a heavy carbon footprint, like coal, like heavy oil, like oil sands. These would have some challenges driven by the cost and the ESG consideration around them. But our belief and our outlook indicate that oil and gas will remain relevant in the energy mix for the foreseeable future. Equally, we are a strong believer in the renewable energy, and we will continue our commitment into that space as well.
Let's drill down from the theory to the practical collaboration that you've both had within the Spanish energy company Cepsa. You're both partners in Cepsa. Marcel, how have your priorities changed at Cepsa since you've become partners and since we've gone into the era of the pandemic? Has there been a significant change in the way that you're approaching the company?
So maybe first, Carlos, when we invest, we are not a pure financial investor. We're also hands-on. So we like to get involved in the company. We're not sitting on the chair of the management, but we like to be very involved. And we have outspoken ideas what to do. I think what was very interesting in the case of CEPSA is that when Musaba and I had those discussions, we agreed, there was an idea of Musaba which was very good, to have a workshop before we started, and basically before he agreed to have us as a partner, about how we together see the company going forward. And that lasted several days. That was very useful to get to know each other better, see how we look at the company. And that's basically where we draw up the plan, what to do together with the company. So and one of the key things was also to bring in new management to help us realize that. The pandemic, of course, changed that in terms of priority, because the immediate priority was and is to keep the people safe, and not only in our company, but also all the stakeholders, neighbors, etc. So very important. That's immediate reality. And then also adjust the plans to basically a contraction in the demand. And so that has been a short-term priority and a very important priority, which is working out well, luckily. And what it is also doing, I think, is accelerating the plans we already had. So no dramatic change, but an acceleration of the plans.
Musaba, can you pick up on that and talk a little bit about what you're learning from the collaboration?
Well, we're very happy to have a highly reputable private equity fund like Carlyle as partner with us in CEPSA. I believe that this partnership is anchored around one principle, which is shared vision. We both have similar view of the world ahead of us. We have a similar view on the strength of the business, and we have a similar view on the value creation. So the shared vision has been, consistent in what we do. We complement each other as well. So I'm truly impressed so far with the value add that Carlyle brings to the table. They have an extensive experience, especially in the downstream, where they have other businesses. We do have also extensive, exposure to the upstream and to the chemical space. And the combination of two provide a company with the right vision, with the right support. As Marcel mentioned, the COVID-19 has been, I would say, disruptive. But also in the meantime, if you look at the silver lining around it, it has accelerated some of the initiatives we identified earlier. The acceleration of embracing a new strategy, the acceleration of putting a new management in place, the importance of becoming resilient in different scenarios going forward. So that worked out very, very effectively. And I am truly impressed with the achievement we've done so far, and looking forward to work more with Marcel and his team. On top of that, I think this partnership also consolidated the relationship between two big entities, Mubadala and Carlyle. We had a long relationship with Carlyle back in more than 10 years back. We're a shareholder of the private equity firm, but also we have identified other opportunities after our latest deal in CEPSA, and looking forward to work with them going forward. On top of the shared vision, we have also established a very strong trust. And sometimes when you build partnerships, it anchors around the vision and the trust.
The point of trust is certainly a critical foundational element, especially when there's so much change that's happening within the sector right now. And perhaps maybe we can extend that into the discussion of diversification. And Saba, if I can ask you to continue on this idea of how you build an effective portfolio. And as you're looking at your portfolio, how are you prioritizing what you add, what you delete? How do you reach the right balance when you think about this in a more general sense for Mubadala?
Well, I sit on the investment committee of Mubadala, so I oversee the full spectrum of investments. We're active in more than 15 different sectors, and I would say the benefit of having a well-diversified portfolio is a natural hedge. So let me give you a few examples. During this pandemic, we have, I would say, a sizable exposure into life sciences, pharmaceutical businesses, and technology as well. These sectors that thrived during the COVID-19. And we've seen the impact of these on our portfolio. We've seen also the part of the portfolio that are heavily impacted by the COVID-19. And, we're embracing, adjusting our views, and, our vision of the future keep evolving.
What is the case for hydrocarbons in this reshaping future? Is it something which is time bound, or do you see it as a competitive issue that will continue to play itself out for a long time?
I think it's the latter, and I think it's very, very interesting to be in this space right now. It's clearly, to us, it's very, very much undervalued because investors in most of the companies don't really see where it's heading, but you will see, I think, a real bifurcation in the whole hydrocarbon space. There will be winners, there will be losers. And the way to how we think about it, hydrocarbons will be necessary and very useful for the future. Think about chemicals. There are many applications for hydrocarbons. But what we did not do as an investment world, all of us before, was to make a distinction between what sort of hydrocarbons, where do they come from, what is their carbon footprint, and what does that mean? So I think what you are seeing now is a rearrangement and a priority on those hydrocarbons which have a relatively low carbon footprint and can play a very important role in the energy transition, and can also play a role later as technology improves and we are able to sequester carbon and also introduce hydrogen in the mix. Because at the end of the day, wind and solar are very important, but those sources alone will not be able to replace hydrocarbons. So I think it's a real mix of that. So I think there is a very exciting story to tell here.
And when you say low carbon footprint, do you mean gas? Do you mean oil with a lower carbon footprint? All of the above?
Yeah, so no, I think it's all of the above. Think about the one extreme would be heavy oil sands we talked about, which we think is difficult. And another extreme would be, for instance, very natural pressure reservoirs like Abu Dhabi has, which are very natural to tap, and once they flow for a very long time, low break-even cost, very low impact on the environment. So that's on the oil side. And then on the gas side, you see similar. You see that similar in terms of assets. Some assets are much better placed than others. So I think you're going to see a re-ranking within gas, within oil, of certain assets which have a much lower impact. Also think about, is the resource close to where the demand is? That's very important, and that has a big impact. Think about platforms where we produce oil and gas which are electrified, etc., etc. So I think you're going to see a big shift and bifurcation in the value of certain assets. It's not just the reserves anymore. It's not just the production anymore, but it's also what is the carbon footprint.
Musaba, Marcel started laying out some criteria, factors to make in investment choices. Can you elaborate for Mubadala? What are the criteria that are relevant to a major sovereign wealth fund, the major sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi?
Well, I think when it comes to if we look forward, we acknowledge there is an energy transition. So in the energy transition world, who are the winners and who are the losers? And if you try to, put criteria, I think the lowest cost producers would be a winner in the long term. The producers with the lowest carbon footprint is definitely going to be a winner in the long term. And let me share a few requirements. I think the world around us are changing. We strongly believe in that. We've seen it in certain industries we're running. One of them is a petrochemical. In the petrochemical space, we are receiving from growing requests from customers to have green products that have the minimum carbon footprint. We've seen it in the petrochemicals, we've seen it in the aluminum, we will see it in other sectors as well. So I think in the long term, lowest cost is a winner, and lowest carbon footprint is definitely going to be welcomed in the future. Natural gas, of course, we've been talking about natural gas for a very long time. It has the lowest carbon footprint when you compare the fossil fuel sources. And as Mubadala, we have, our latest investments reflect that belief. So if you look at our upstream arm, Mubadala Petroleum in Southeast Asia, the two big projects they're running in Southeast Asia are natural gas. And the big project we also partner with IOCs in Egypt is a natural gas as well. So we have an optimistic view on the natural gas, on the low cost oil, and on the lowest carbon resources going forward. So couple that with the commitment of Mubadala on the renewable energy, you have a good mix of portfolio going forward. But I would like to add one last point on this matter is I've been around for enough time, been around more than 22 years in this industry. One thing that I strongly believe that the technology will definitely help us in moving from the carbon intensive economy and operation into a low carbon economy and operation. So carbon capture technology is an emerging and hopefully will be commercially deployed at a larger scale. So I'm confident that the technology will definitely help the oil and gas, a traditional industry like oil and gas, in eradicating and minimizing the CO2 emission and reducing the impact on climate change.
Marcel, let's again pick up on those themes as well. Both criteria for investment, expectations of your investors, and how important is technology in the views that you get from your investors on how they want you to think about your investment strategies?
Energy partners are clearly focused on this opportunity where they think hydrocarbons, which we agree are undervalued right now and will play a role a long time. And most of them also think that there is a real role to play in this energy transition, and natural gas will also play a very important role there with that. As an investor in a private equity fund, of course, the key is and heading the investments is to make sure you make robust investments, and your investors, which are mostly pension funds and several sovereign wealth funds, make a good return and absolutely don't lose their money, but make a good return. So you want to build a robust portfolio going forward. That's what they expect from us. That's what we're doing. And also that we have the know-how when we buy these assets, how to reposition them to make sure with the right technology, applied and management skills to make sure that these companies are and stay future-proof. So that's how we're thinking about it. And the energy transition is absolutely key in that. Because I think this repositioning will also mean that when you reposition the company, there will be an important value uplift as a result of that.
So, Musaba, you're investing resources for your nation. When you look ahead, will energy be able to compete with IT and with pharma and other higher tech sectors to be able to win the confidence of the returns that you can actually provide back to your citizens?
Well, when you look at the other sectors in Mubadala. Definitely, we're a big investor in technology and life sciences and other sectors. And most of these investments attract, I would say, the right capital deployment, and they're achieving the right returns. In the energy space, I think you need to be smart. You need to be smart in identifying which opportunities, because as we discussed earlier, to go into a high-cost resources is not a good idea, especially in view of the energy transition going forward. So a smart investor in the energy space needs to carefully time your entry, identify the initiatives that need to be taken in order to create more value, and have a strategy on the exit plan in the future, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term. And also study these investments, are the ability of these industries to embrace new changes and evolve and pivot into a new energy transition. So we look at many parameters, Carlos, when it comes to the energy investment. Energy investments will continue to be attractive to the smart investors.
A couple of quick comments from both of you on geography. Marcel, Africa, you've been involved there. Is there still an attractive future?
Yeah, I think Africa is very attractive. Of course, you can't generalize, but that's the same for Europe or South America or Asia. So it depends, of course, where you are and who your partners are. But it's very clear Africa will play a very important role in the future of energy. And that is oil and gas, but also other sources of energy. So very important continent.
Home in Abu Dhabi, Musaba.
Well, in Abu Dhabi, there's no doubt that the UAE is a leader in the economic diversification in the region. We are continuing the journey towards the future. We're very optimistic about all the opportunities available in the region, the strategic location of the region as well, accessibility of big markets in nearby, and also the UAE is being blessed with a visionary agility and swift, I would say, and appropriate decision-making leadership. So last week they announced restructuring of the ministerial cabinet, and they have come up with a new cabinet that is focusing forward and putting the economic diversification as a core, I would say, vision for the country going forward. Overall, Mubadala played a great role in helping diversifying many sectors in the country. But the future looks even more promising. We're seeing the likes of Hub 71. You've seen it maybe, Carlos, here. An ecosystem that attracts startups and putting more focus on technology. We are also promoting Abu Dhabi as the financial hub through Abu Dhabi Global Market. So we're very, very confident that we will be able to achieve that vision and set a role model in the future.
I don't think I could beat Musaba's pitch to you, Marcel, about why you should be going to Abu Dhabi. So I don't know if you want to add anything to it after his eloquent statement.
No. I agree with it. I mean, the country Abu Dhabi is, of course, very, very special because of the very large resources, and not like Musaba said, not only in oil and gas, but also for solar, and then of course all the know-how which is there. I think that is one of the very interesting things I think about this industry, which we shouldn't underestimate. There's so full capabilities in this industry. So if you all these engineering capabilities and all the other capabilities, it's a complex industry. If you apply that to different resources in the right places and with the right partners in the world, this is a very exciting business to invest in for a long time. And of course it changes, all businesses change, and this business changes also. But especially now in this time where a lot of capital is needed and there's not so much capital available, it's a very exciting time to be investing in this space.
Let me close with one final question. People often talk about value and values, value to the shareholder, upholding values of transition and sustainability. Marcel, is that a Pollyannish objective or is that realistic?
Two can go very well hand in hand. So they don't need to be different topics or contradictory. I think if you have the right values and you stick to the right values, you will build a much more attractive company for the future. And I think that's really what you want to do. And it's where investors want to invest their money in. If you buy a company, and of course private equity later also sells companies, you have to build and you want to build sustainable companies. And you also make the companies more attractive for the people who work for you, for the other stakeholders, the financial partners, banks, etc. you work with. So I think these things can go very well hand in hand and will actually lead to much better results.
Musaba, Marcel, it's been a pleasure talking with you. And what strikes me is that as you look at uncertainty in the future, both of you are talking about embracing it and accelerating change. That's something that you can't resist. You talk about the relationship between lowest cost and lowest carbon footprint and how that is a fundamental criterion for the future and an expectation of investors. You talk about value for your shareholders, value for your country, but the values that you have in sustainability, which is critical to success in the future. Impressive principles on which to run your business, on which to think about investment for the future. Thank you for joining the CERAWeek conversation. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you both.